So let's finish the first chapter's introduction of a few more simple economic terms or concepts. So I want to talk about positive statements or positive economics or positive analysis and normative statements or normative economics or normative analysis. So it helps clarify our thinking a little bit if we distinguish between these positive statements or positive economics and normative statements and normative economics. So positive statements or positive economics, claims that attempt to describe the world as it is. So these really shouldn't depend on if you're a Democrat or a Republican or conservative or liberal or a Christian or not or whatever ethical view you have. This is simply trying to determine cause and effect. So positive statements might be wrong, but the logic does not depend on any ethical assumptions. So a positive statement might deal with something like taxes on alcohol. So if we raise the tax on all alcohol, wine, spirits, beer, maybe we raise it another, let's say, $1 per gallon, 200 proof alcohol. So that would be an extra $1 per gallon of pure alcohol. A positive economic statement would be that additional tax would reduce consumption of beer by a certain amount. That same tax per gallon of pure alcohol would reduce wine consumption by a certain amount. It's a claim about the effect of the tax on people's decision to buy alcohol, or how much that tax will affect the amount of whiskey or gin being purchased in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Or maybe we increase the tax on gasoline by 20 cents a gallon. Again, an attempt to predict how much that will reduce the purchase of gasoline is an example of positive economics, positive analysis. Your religious views, moral views, political views really shouldn't be an assumption in this analysis. This is just trying to predict how people are going to respond to the change in the tax, which will affect the price on alcohol, or the change in the tax on gasoline, which affects the final price. Now, a normative statement goes one step further. Often with normative statements, in fact, almost, I guess pretty much always, there's a should involved. We should increase the tax on alcohol by a certain amount because the benefits exceed the costs. Now, what are going to be the benefits? Well, the Commonwealth of Virginia will raise some more funds. There will be less drinking, so there will be a reduction in, say, drunk driving deaths, and also in people getting ill from drinking too much alcohol, probably a reduction in sexually transmitted diseases. And we are saying that all those benefits exceed the costs, and the costs are that people will have a little less fun. Parties and certain activities will be a little less fun because less alcohol will be purchased because it's a little bit more expensive. Now, what if I asked you the following? If I predicted this tax on alcohol up here reduces drunk driving deaths by 10 per year in the Commonwealth of Virginia, is that positive economics or normative economics? That's positive economics because it's a prediction. It's not saying we should do it. It's just saying the higher tax reduces drunk driving deaths by a certain amount. Or if we say that higher tax on alcohol reduces sexually transmitted diseases by a certain amount, that's also positive economics. But it's normative economics when we go one step further and say it is a good policy, because you have to somehow put values on each life saved or each transmission of a sexually transmitted disease that is stopped. And you have to put, those are going to be benefits. We add up the benefits, but we have to somehow estimate or come up with a method of determining the costs of people having a little less fun at parties, or the loss of drinking a little less wine, or fewer gin and tonics, or less beer. Now, with certain assumptions, we can do that, but those assumptions do depend on our values. You can't prove that people are going to lose a certain amount of happiness per drink not consumed. We can say, if this is true, then it might be an efficient decision to raise the tax, but we can't really prove how much each individual person is going to be harmed from drinking a little less alcohol. Okay, so normative economics always is going to use some positive economics, because we have to identify the cause and effect before we can even begin to say or argue that this is a good policy. But positive economics does not use normative statements. So a lot of the time in this course, we're going to try to identify cause and effects, but we will be talking about efficiency at some point, and I will be making some assumptions about how to add up benefits and costs. But you can't really prove those scientifically. They are just assumptions, and you have to decide whether or not they're reasonable assumptions.